Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the I Am Not Worthless podcast, my weekly podcast where I discuss random topics. Today, we're going to discuss biology topic, and specifically, I was watching Alien Earth and Halo, the TV shows, and it got me thinking about both life on Earth and how can life exist outside of Earth, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, the first thing we need to understand is what a lot of people who believe in aliens think about life outside our planet. There's an assumption called carbon chauvinism, where people assume that life on Earth is carbon and water based. That must mean every life, if life exists outside of Earth, it must be water-based and carbon-based. And that's not always the case. Or can't always be the case, I should say. Now, carbon works for Earth because it has 4 valence electrons, allowing it to form stable, flexible 3D rings and chains. So things like proteins, DNA. And water is a good solvent because it's neutral. So it won't dissolve our cells. It won't do anything except be there. However, that's for Earth climate. Earth has water. So we can have a carbon water system because we have the right temperature, the right amount of water. Life needs something to bind molecules together. That is how life forms. You have different molecules that bind together, creating proteins, creating DNA, creating life. Also, you need a liquid solvent for that stuff to float in. Otherwise, it's just sitting there. Not life. So what if the planet is silicon-based? What if that's the dominant element found on the planet? Well, it sits right under carbon, so it has 4 valence electrons. However, because it's lower on the periodic table, it has more heavier bonds, and it's not as flexible in Earth climates. That's why you can't build, that's why you don't really see any silicon-based life forms on Earth. It doesn't work. It can't work. And the reason is, in an oxygen-rich world, oxygen-rich liquid water-based world, silicon immediately reacts those 2 compounds to form solid quartz or glass, silicon dioxide. So if an alien were to come on Earth and breathe our oxygen, our atmosphere, our air, they wouldn't exhale carbon dioxide like we do. They would literally exhale solid sand, solid glass out. So for silicon to work as a basis of life, you need a sub-zero, oxygen-free world with non-water solvents like liquid methane, liquid ethane. Anything would be fine, not water. As long as it's not H2O, you can have silicon-based life form. So something like Saturn's moon Titan could work as a possibility. Another idea for a solvent would be ammonia, which liquid ammonia happens around 77 Celsius as a solvent. So if you have a planet that has an ammonium-rich world, you could have ammonia solvent as the basis for your life. Now, because of that, though, your biochemical reactions would be slowed down dramatically because of that lower temperature. So time would be different, movement would feel different. I would almost say it's like the Ents from Lord of the Rings. Their way of thinking, their way of doing things isn't fast-paced like humans or hobbits or dwarves. It's more, oh, we got time to do this. Another possibility is boron or sulfur. Boron forms chemical chains if the environment is rich in heavy atmospheric gases. So if you have a planet that has those capabilities or those qualities, you can form life if there's boron. Now, Earth has environments around the world. We have environments around the world that are extreme. That there are places that don't have sunlight, that are very cold or sub-zero, basically, or areas that don't have oxygen. And you might think nothing could survive there. You wouldn't be able to find any life there. But as we have learned and discovered over time, there are environments that we thought would not have life that have life, proving that alien life forms could exist given the right conditions and the right environment altogether. So things like tardigrades and anhydrobiosis. So that 10 times fast. Tardigrades, water bears, enter anhydrobiosis, where they basically expel 95% of the water from their body, replace it with protective glass coating, proteins, and they can enter a suspended animation. Meaning, they can survive in the vacuum of space. They could survive in absolute zero or colder, even. Well, basically, absolute zero is the coldest, so scratch that. Absolute zero temperatures. And basically get hit with direct solar radiation. Meaning, panspermia or interstellar transit is possible to survive if you have that capability. Another area that has alien life here on Earth is deep sea vents. Around hydrothermic vents in the ocean, volcanic hydrothermic vents, you have total pitch dark environments. Life, instead of running on photosynthesis, which is taking sunlight converting sugars, carbon dioxide into sugars, you are going to run on chemosynthesis. These giant tube worms take the hydrogen, there's hydrogen sulfide eating bacteria. They eat that, and that shows you that life can survive with, kilometers of ice on Jupiter's moon Europa, Saturn's moon Enceladus, and there doesn't have to be a sun. You could be nowhere near a sun whatsoever, and these organisms can still survive. A disaster in the Ukraine Chernobyl disaster, we have found fungi inside the nuclear reactor in Chernobyl that eats the radiation. They have high levels of the melanin compound that allows them to absorb gamma radiation and convert it into chemical energy. So they could take gamma radiation, which would kill or mutate us, and they use that as fuel, the process known as radiosynthesis. So you have anhydrobiosis, you have chemosynthesis, and you have radiosynthesis. Different ways to survive environments that are not conducive to life for us. You also have the Deinococcus radiodurans, Conan the bacterium as it's called. It can survive 10,000 times the radiation dosage that a human could handle. Radiation is bad for most animals because it destroys DNA. It basically breaks it up, shatters it into pieces, basically useless. That's why systems shut down, body part, you lose hair, you lose, musculature, you lose bone density, because the DNA that's holding you together, that's building things and keeping things in check, gets destroyed. And if there's no code, then there's no way to make the protein. And there's no way to make the protein, and there's no way to repair anything. Because, again, remember, every day you are losing proteins and other things in your body that are being replaced just as quickly if you're a fully healthy human individual or a fully healthy animal. The Conan the bacterium, basically takes multiple copies of its genome and puts it in a tight ring. So when radiation hits, instead of it breaking it apart and the animal dying, it is able to stitch their DNA back together and keep on keeping on. Now, this swings us into the conversation of, well, what about Alien? What about Halo? What about other science fiction alien races, alien species? We'll start with, of course, Alien from Alien Earth, the Xenomorph. You might think that H.R. Geiger's Xenomorph is movie magic. There's no way it could possibly happen here on Earth. Actually, it can, with a mix of Earth parasitology and industrial chemistry. Basically, a xenomorph is a giant parasitoid wasp. Earth wasps will lay their eggs inside caterpillars. The eggs will hatch. The caterpillars then will get eaten from the inside out. The facehugger is a 6-foot wasp larva vector. It's a giant wasp larva. Now you could say, well, wait a minute. Acid blood, that can't be realistic. That would burn through your veins. And what about burning the hull? Well, burning the hull is actually easy. We can use superacids that we have called, like, for example, fluoroantimonic acid. There are acids that literally you have to have a high level clearance, government clearance. And I'm sure the rest of the world has this too for most of the countries. Has it to where basically the only people who can access these kind of acids are people who are licensed to have it and know how to handle it, because they are very easily digestible of anything. You basically pour some of this acid on yourself, you are dissolved. And handling it is very difficult. It's very hard to get a hold of. Very controlled. Now, you might think, well, but what about the veins? What about its blood system, circulatory system? Well, there are fluoropolymers, natural occurring fluoropolymers that could exist. Biological Teflon is a good example. Teflon can handle a lot of things. And you might say, well, but it doesn't eat. We don't see it eating in the movie. We don't see it, in the TV show. We don't see it consuming anything. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have to have a digestive system. It could basically be a giant battery-operated organism. A combination, basically a cyborg. It could literally be a cyborg. Basically, it could have bioelectric chemical gradients that allow it to store energy, so basically capacitors. And it could literally sit in the vent and wait for weeks and not die. So Alien from Alien franchise universe is possible. Next up, we'll talk about halos, the Thing / the Flood. Depends on where you are in the medium and which one you're talking about. Most monsters, you're worried about getting eaten. But what if, instead of you getting eaten alive, or fully eaten alive, your DNA gets rewritten, recoded, to then basically control you and possibly others? There is a thing called horizontal gene transfer. Bacteria swap genes all the time with different species of bacteria all the time. In fact, we actually do use for gene therapy bacteria that will swap DNA, swap genes with your DNA, with your genome, so that you can maybe reverse a condition. Now, it's not that simple. There's a lot more to it, and if you want, you can Google it, research it. It is a thing. Now, back to Halo, the Thing and the Flood take this horizontal gene transfer to the extreme. They take the entire cell structure of an organism and change it with theirs. So they are no longer genetically human. So once you get taken over by the Flood, you're not a human, or you're not whatever. You are not your species anymore. Now the question you might say is, well, what about the hive mind? I noticed that they basically act as a hive. How can single cells make decisions? Well, Earth has slime molds. Slime molds have no brain. But if since they share chemical signals, they can solve mazes. If you scale that up to the grave mind from Halo, billions of host bodies can basically transfer chemical signals to each other, and you get the hive mind. You get a hive mind. Now you might wonder, what about Star Trek and the humanoids? The problem with early science fiction movies is that they're limited by prosthetics, by special effects. So most aliens looked like an actor in a rubber mask, because that's all you could do. We didn't have special effects or CGI early days of sci-fi. Now, upright walking allows you to use your hands for tools. If your eyes are facing forward, you get depth perception. If your eyes were over here, you wouldn't really have depth perception. Now, back to the carbon chauvinism idea too. If you assume that every single planet has 6 foot bipeds with front-facing eyes, you're basically assuming that Earth is the only way to make life. And as we explained earlier, it's not always the case. Sci-fi franchises like Star Trek with preservers, ancient humanoids, can wave this away by saying that a single precursor race seeded the galaxy with DNA, and that allowed humanoid-like organisms to thrive. It's a cop-out because you're not putting the money into the CGI to make non-humanoids. Now, what would happen if an organism grows on another planet? what things would we expect to be different than humans or other animals on Earth? Well, first, your vision. If they have the exact same type of sun that we do, they would see Roy G. Biv. All the colors of the rainbow, potentially, is an option. So, but if you have a red dwarf, that's only infrared light. So, aliens that evolved were created on a planet that's orbiting a red dwarf, M dwarf star, wouldn't see visible light. They would only see infrared light, thermal signature, like a pit viper. F-type blue star output would be heavy ultraviolet. So aliens in that star light pattern would have hyper-detailed UV vision, like the mantis shrimp here on Earth. So again, depending on the star, your vision would be different. Next would be your bioelectric and magnetic perception. On Earth, we're limited to sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. Those are what we can develop here on Earth and what we need on Earth. But there are animals on Earth that have different sensory organs, different sensory abilities. For example, ampullae of Lorenzini. Say that 10 times fast. Sharks have pores on their snouts that can sense a fish's heartbeat electrical pulses. The little pulses they put out, the sharks can sense. So maybe an alien that develops on a murky, dark ocean planet or a very thick atmosphere would, instead of seeing the world with their eyes, they would use more bioelectric fields or maybe the magnetic poles to see their world, to navigate the world. Now again, also radical limb layout and movement. If you change our arms and legs, either put them somewhere else or get rid of them entirely, you are changing how we develop as a civilization and what our technology develops. So, for humans, we have front, back, left, and right. We have 4 sides. If you ignore top and bottom, top of your head and bottom of your feet. If you ignore that part. Starfish have a radial symmetry. No front, no back. So, if you develop radial symmetry, you can't develop a spaceship like we have. They wouldn't have a need for a cockpit or a front seat. They would have a circular 360-degree operated machinery. Because they don't have, like I said, they don't have a front and a back. They only have left and right. So you would basically have a 360, not front and then rear. There's more that we can talk about. There's more that can be discussed. This is all speculation? Yes. I personally believe that there can be alien life out there. It's possible. To assume, though, that it isn't there, that it's carbon-based, that it's just like humans, that they're upright, standing, no. I say throw all of it out the window. Any alien that exists on another planet or another galaxy would have to be biologically designed for that environment, that evolutionarily designed for that environment. So depending on the atmosphere, depending upon the solvents that are on the planet, what's the dominant element, that will determine what life looks like. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. Next week we're going to do a math topic. Stay safe, stay cool. Peace out.